Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming to this press conference about the fire service. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Peter Holland, who is the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor to England. To his right is his colleague David Norris, who is a Fire and Rescue Advisor. And of course, to my left is Mr. Rosworth McLaughlin, the Acting Fire Chief Officer. And I'm Eric Bush, the Chief Officer for the Ministry of Home Affairs, who has ministerial responsibility for the fire service since July 2013. When we took over ministerial responsibility, we quickly identified there were a number of matters relating to the fire service. One has recently been published around comp time versus overtime and accrued vacation leave. Since taking over ministerial responsibility, we've tried to get a full understanding of all of the issues, not just at the outcome level, but the source level. When I was over in the UK in November, which was a trip sponsored by the Governor's Office, I met with Mr. Holland and Mr. Norris and discussed the Cayman Fire Service, as well as the possibility of them coming to the Cayman Islands and conducting a review of the operations and the service itself versus the resources, capabilities, and estate that we provide the service to conduct their operations. Thankfully, Mr. Holland and Mr. Norris accepted the invitation, and they arrived in Grand Cayman on Friday, the 31st of January. And immediately started the review of our fire service. Today marks the end of their physical review, and they'll be flying back tonight. The process itself started out a couple weeks ago, whereby Mr. Holland and Mr. Norris requested information once the terms of reference was agreed with the ministry. And the information sharing started. Then we have the physical review or physical visit of the process, which is now complete, and followed by the continuing of sharing of information, which will happen for the following couple following weeks, whereby then Mr. Holland, Mr. Norris will provide a draft report to us, as this is a consultative process. Between the ministry and the fire service management, we will provide our comments and feedback around factual issues, nothing to do with Mr. Holland or Mr. Norris's assessment, as that is their professional. That's what we're asking them to provide, but more along the issues of accuracy, and then. Once that is complete, a final report will be submitted to the ministry, in which the ministry intends to publish. So with that, I would like to hand over to Mr. Holland to tell us a little bit about himself and perhaps some of his findings.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Bush, and thank you for the very warm welcome that we've received here in the Cayman Islands, particularly from the fire service. Firefighters are well known as a family throughout the world, and the Cayman Islands are no exception to that, and we have had an extremely warm welcome in our 4 days here. So I'd like to place on record my sincere thanks to everyone who we've met during this visit for the help and support that they've given. As Mr. Bush has pointed out, I'm the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for the UK Government, and as such involved in inspecting fire services, and also providing professional advice to the Minister responsible for fire and the Secretary of State for the government department within which I work. And I also go into what is known as the COBRA meeting, the Cabinet Office Briefing Room meeting, on issues of major emergencies. And indeed, that body has been meeting a lot over recent times because, unlike you, we've been experiencing vast quantities of rain which have caused major problems, and I've been involved in mobilising national assets to assist the parts of the country that are badly flooded. I've been involved in the Fire and Rescue Service for 42 years. I was a Chief Fire Officer for 17 years, and I've been the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for 12 months. I sit on the board of the National Fire Protection Association in the United States and have done for 5 years. I was the International President of the Institution of Fire Engineers and Chairman of that board for 5 years. And I've also been the President of the UK Chief Fire Officers Association. As I said, we've had 4 days on this island and also half a day over on the Brac. We've met with the Commissioner of Police, met with senior people from health related to the ambulance service, the EMS service, and also planning. Equally importantly, we went to the 911 dispatch centre, and we also met with the Airports Authority at the airport. I'd like to tell you just how good your fire engines are. You've made a major investment, which I believe was around $6.5 million, and it was money certainly very well spent in terms of the tankers that you have available and the rescue and command vehicles that you have available, and the ladder trucks. I mean, they really are fantastic pieces of kit which your firefighters have got to, I hesitate to use the word play with, but firefighters understand that language, but to use in emergency situations, and they are absolutely the right level of kit. Your acting Chief Fire Officer has great ambitions for the service, which are incredibly laudable, but I must say, because of the financial constraints that have been placed upon the fire service, he does need help and does need some support. And I've spoken to Mr. Bush about what that might entail for the future. When we were on our way over here, I was considering what the expectations are from your fire service in this wonderful place, and clearly the economy is a big part of that, and equally, if not more importantly, protecting the public is a big part of that. So I was very interested to find out from the fire safety person about what level of standards you had, particularly in your hotels and commercial buildings, which of course are a big part of protecting the economy of your country. And I must say, and obviously we've been staying in one of your hotels, the standards are indeed very good. With the acting chief's drive, he has ensured that those fire safety standards have been maintained and indeed taken forward. And I know that can be quite a challenge, and it can be difficult when there are issues identified where it might impact on the ability of that hotel to operate. And there's certainly been an example where there were issues in one hotel which were dealt with incredibly well by the fire service and the local management to ensure that hotel stayed open and that people were safe. And I was very impressed with that. Having said that, I do think the staffing there is under-resourced. I think one person carrying out the amount of work that needs to be undertaken on 3 islands is just not sufficient. We visited 2 airports actually. Obviously, we flew into the Brac, and we met with the Airports Authority, and I'm very reassuring for you that the standard of equipment, as I mentioned, in terms of the domestic fire service, applies equally in terms of the airport capability. And you have some fantastic vehicles there, which, should, God forbid, something happen at the airport, they're very well equipped to be able to deal with that for the larger airliners that are coming in. And we're flying out on one tonight, the largest that you'll take at the moment, the 767. But what was apparent to me is there is a desire to encourage the landing of the 777s, which are a larger aircraft. And to take that larger aircraft, you do need a couple of additional firefighters on duty at that time. And I would actively encourage you, if you want to help develop the economy of the country, that clearly some more firefighters are needed to ensure that can happen. I did find concerns in relation to some of the training that was going on and has been planned. I mean, there's been cutbacks in the training budget, and a clear focus does need to be made on assessing just what training needs to be carried out by firefighters and officers, particularly in relation to the airport certification. That really is fundamentally important. as indeed is the personal protective equipment. And I must say some of that personal protective equipment I don't think is fit for purpose and certainly needs some investment to ensure that the firefighters are properly protected for the job that's expected of them. When we visited the 911 centre, I must say I was very, very impressed. That really is a first-class facility for your three emergency services. But I must say, I don't think the fire service are taking full advantage of that capability. The emergency EMS service and the police service do take what seems to me to be full advantage of it, but the fire service don't, in that they don't dispatch the fire engines directly from that facility, which would also enable them to take advantage of the excellent management information systems which are linked into that capability. So I would certainly advocate fire calls being handled from there, albeit I recognise there are issues related to the airport and the way that operates from the point of view of the firefighters in close proximity to the airfield handling the calls. Because of the financial constraints, it appeared to me that we needed to focus on looking at the duty systems in which the staff operate on. And there's certainly some opportunities, I believe, to operate something which people who understand the American system would call volunteer firefighters. We in the UK call it retained duty systems, where people are retained to be on call as firefighters from their homes or from business. And there's no doubt at all that there are opportunities to utilise staff in that fashion, both on the BRAC, on Little Cayman, and indeed here on Grand Cayman, not just as backup, but to cover those areas which are expanding on the island, particularly over the East End. We visited the hospital and we didn't actually go inside, but we certainly drove up to it, and there's a major development taking place, as I'm sure you all know, and the East End of the island is developing and is quite a long way from the fire station at Frank Sound. So perhaps an opportunity there to look at considering whether there should be a retained duty system fire station, or indeed a whole-time duty fire station there for the future. But that's work that can be carried out using software systems to see how best that fire cover could be provided to both to the communities there and also to the commercial buildings that are there. There are some training challenges. We did meet with the Commissioner of Police, as I said at the beginning, and one of the issues that we looked at was around incident command systems, and there is a different incident command system being used by the police to the fire service, different jargon, different language being used, and that, for me, has to change. And I know the Acting Chief is very much aware of the need for the three emergency services to work more closely together, and in working more closely together you absolutely do need to have use the same language so people do understand exactly what the position is. I don't want to scare anybody with those comments. I mean, they will work well together, but they'll work even better together should they, and I hope they do, develop the incident command system. What was clear on the fire stations, particularly with the domestic side, because there are limitations in taking airport crews away from their duties because they have to be able to respond to the airfield very quickly. The domestic crews, I think there is spare capacity to use those staff more effectively. And indeed, when I met Mr. Stephen Duval at Health, who's responsible for the EMS service, we talked about the fire service being involved in first response. So when somebody has a health problem, that they, if the fire service are the nearest asset that's available, they could respond to help that person in need. That system operates very effectively both in the United States and in the UK, and will undoubtedly save lives. No question at all in my mind. There would need to be an investment in some defibrillators for fire engines and some training for fire crews. But that's certainly not insurmountable in any way, shape or form, and I would strongly advocate that moves forward, given that, as I understand it, all parties involved are really keen to see that move forward. I also think that I talked about the perhaps under provision in terms of fire safety. And I think the crews could be more involved in the inspection of buildings, and particularly those that have a building fire certificate that can be checked out. Crews are involved at the moment, but I do think there is more could be done utilising those crews, perhaps with some additional training to check that things like fire alarms, emergency lighting, means of escape, exit doors aren't blocked, and the like. And I'd really like to conclude by, as I said right at the beginning, thanking everybody for the welcome they've given to me. And I sincerely hope that when we provide the review, which realistically is going to be in the next month, that really does help take the Cayman Island Fire Service very positively forward. And I thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Just with that, I'd also, on behalf of the Cayman Islands government and the Cayman Islands in general, like to thank you both for accepting our invitation. It is at no charge that they've provided their time and will be providing a report. We simply had to provide the transportation and room and board. So, gentlemen, really thank you so much. Now we'll open it up for questions.
Holland, can you tell us, were you here to look as well at sort of morale and things like that amongst the fire service? And if that was part of your remit, can you tell us how you felt about how the staff morale seems to be to you? And also whether you were involved in any of these issues that we have about, or whether this is really a question for Mr. Bush, which is about clarifying all of this issue of comp time, what's overtime, what is the situation with accrued overtime that I understand some of them have. So if you could just clarify those issues in general, staff morale, if that was in your remit.
Yeah, shall I come in first? By all means. I think I mentioned that we'd visited two crews of firefighters and had quite a long chat with them. I think on both occasions it was around 2 hours with each group. And there is no question there is low morale amongst the firefighters. Some of the issues you've just mentioned there were definitely raised. One of them in relation to their personal protective equipment, their firefighting kit, was certainly raised with me. And I know Mr. Bush is very keen to try and deal with the issues you've just mentioned, but certainly that's a big factor as far as the firefighters are concerned. And they certainly do need some support in that regard.
Just to supplement that, Wendy, you know, as I said in my introduction, one of what we're trying to do is address the source areas rather than the outcome. The outcome is the low morale. The outcome is perhaps high sickness levels, issues of that. We're trying. I believe we've identified some of the source of that, and that is lack of communication. That is a feeling of disconnection, or feeling that the fire service is out on its own, and the acting chief fire officer is here too and can certainly speak to that. Since we've taken over in July, the Ministry of Home Affairs has systematically looked at what the issues are, how can we identify those issues, and then once they're identified, what solutions can be provided to rectify them. On the communication, on the connection to larger government, we have invited the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor and Mr. Norris to come in, and they have found some of the source issues that we will be addressing. The issue of comp time, overtime, and accrued vacation is something that I met with fire officers a couple weeks ago to talk about, and based on the feedback I received from there, we will be resolving the issues of back pay, if you will, what's owed to them in this month's pay period. So that in itself, the government is accepting what is owed, if you will, and will be making good on that. Now, it's all good and well to pay that, and then 6 months down the line we have the same thing again, because we have an issue whereby the fire service appears to be under-resourced for the operations that we're asking it to do, whether it be on the airdrome side, on the domestic response side, or the fire prevention, which Mr. Holland referenced is one individual for the entire Cayman Islands in fire prevention. I think anybody would agree that that's not enough. So the government has agreed to increase the capacity and resources of the fire service this financial year, whereby we hope that and there will be an active recruitment process, or there is an active recruitment process going on, whereby we will be increasing the size of the fire service up to previous levels. I think in previous years we've lost, I think it's gone from 40 individuals, but we've maintained or increased the level of area, what I mean in developed area, that the fire service is expected to respond to, and certainly increase the number of flights at our airports. So again, it's looking at what we truly expect the fire service to do. Once we agree to that, understand the best practice and most efficient way of doing that, once we agree that, then providing the resources to do it.
Andrew Harris from Cayman 27. First off, to Mr. Holland, I reported on a story earlier this week where fire officers were complaining about the issue of safety and security. The West Bay station was burgled twice in the previous year, and recently, last week. Was security an issue when you were doing your checks? Did that come up at all? And how do the stations compare to stations back home?
That's very interesting, because that's the first I've heard of that, and I'm surprised that that wasn't raised when we went to the West Bay station, actually. And certainly I wasn't looking at the stations from a security point of view, and clearly that's a concern. I mean, it's a problem that we've had in the UK, where people have burgled fire stations, and security is taken very seriously. But you know, I mean, there's no more I can add on that, other than the fact that I would advocate that, you know, security is looked at in the light of that. But I'm sure that's already happened. I'd be surprised if, you know, if a burglary has already taken place, that nothing's been done about that.
Okay.
And just to add to that, you know, one of the policies that the Ministry of Home Affairs has is an asset replacement policy and general upkeep. Mr. Holland praised the quality of equipment that we had and the investment that was made. I think in 2005, after Hurricane Ivan, of over $6 million. That equipment in its current use is expected to last 15 years from when you purchase it. So, you know, we as an entity, as a ministry, are well aware of that. And in fact, we put out a press release today about our asset replacement strategy, where we purchase vehicles for our various departments every 5 years, because we realize, especially with emergency vehicles, police vehicles and whatnot, that have a high level of use, we get into health and safety issues, we get into issues of economy, that the vehicle, it's actually cheaper to replace the vehicle in a strategic way than it is to keep it for 10 years and break down or heaven forbid, is not safe. Now, in the fire context, we are looking with the acting fire chief at the estate itself, as well as the equipment, as Mr. Holland mentioned, to see what the immediate needs are, prioritize those, and then address them in a strategic fashion.
From experience, I could certainly come in around vehicles. I mean, there is no funding set aside for a vehicle replacement program for the big trucks, if you like. There is for the cars and vans and things like that. And I would certainly advocate that is seriously looked at, because they are very expensive piece of equipment to, and the last thing you want is get close to the point at which it needs replacement and then suddenly got to find hundreds of thousands of dollars. That needs long-term planning and thinking to make sure that happens.
And in fairness, our accounting system already does account for that, I guess you'd say, in our depreciation. It's just actually setting and using the depreciation funding or budgets for replacement of assets when needed.
First of all, Mr. Bush, did you say how much the government was going to have to pay in past due overtime and time off and all of this?
No, I didn't. I can say it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And how many
goes back? Well, I think there's 125 staff in total, and I would venture to say that between overtime, comp time, and accrued vacation, that affects all of them, up to the acting chief.
More than $500,000?
Yes,
but not $1 million.
Truth be told, it's between. Happy to say it's between $500,000 and $1 million. Not trying to be coy or it's.
You may not know exactly.
Well, we're trying to find out what exact ratios are appropriate in straight time, time and a half, and double time, which would affect.
Okay. It's curious if you look at the stats that 911 keeps for fire response, EMS response, police response. The layman you look at that and go, well, fire or police and EMS are by far the busier of the two. Mm-hmm. And you all are having to pay this accrued time to these people already. But if you're going to start making them respond to EMS calls as first responders, that means they're going to be responding to a lot more calls than they do now. And there's a number of issues there. I mean, they're going to. It seems like they would get a lot busier. And also, they're using a pretty heavy, expensive apparatus to run to a medical call. I mean, it uses more gas, wears it down quicker, that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know if you've all looked at all that stuff or not.
Yeah, happy to answer that. I mean, there are fairly small rescue vehicles, and I've already had conversation with the acting chief around other opportunities in terms of fire apparatus, as you'd say over here, on apparatus, as we say in the UK. There are opportunities to look at perhaps different ways of firefighting which use less water, using smaller vehicles for first strike. But this needs to be built into that vehicle replacement program as and when funds are made available. But the rescue vehicles certainly are more than capable, and it'll be much lighter on fuel to enable it to be cost effective. And there should be no additional salary cost to firefighters for responding to EMS calls. I mean, the capacity already exists for them to respond as it currently is.
Are any firefighters currently trained as EMTs or paramedics?
All firefighters are trained as first aiders. The additional training I mentioned earlier on would be ensuring that they were capable of operating the automatic defibrillators. But my experience tells me from previous experience in this that doesn't take very long to train somebody to use an automatic defibrillator, and one which is, of course, compatible with the EMS service, so that when the ambulance arrives, it's a seamless transfer across.
And Brent, just to add to that, the majority of accrual of overtime and not being able to take vacation is based on what resources are provided versus what capacity, not what capacity is needed, whether it be by civil aviation regulation, coupled with domestic response, appropriate domestic response. What I think Mr. Holland is saying is we already have that capacity. We need to provide that capacity. Now, is there something that could be added to add value to the fire service itself? So whilst we have to pay for the capacity, instead of just able to respond to a rescue or fire call, now they can respond to a medical call. Now, in response to your thing about heavier trucks and whatnot, take all that on board. But this is actually once we implement this will increase the level of emergency response that the Cayman Islands government can provide. I venture to say, and knowing a little bit about response time requirements and and mortality rates of heart attack victims not getting a response time. Minutes, seconds matter. So if we can improve that by increasing the capability of capacity we already have, I would venture to say that's money well spent.
Okay, so maybe a not so nice way of saying what you just said was you've already got people in the fire stations that may or may not be responding to calls. We want to use their time better.
Yeah.
Well, again,
exactly right.
Again,
Okay.
but Mr. Holland and Mr. Norris's visit is to look at our service and to look at best practice and what's being done in the UK and in other parts of the world. This simply would start to fit in with current best practice in other countries.
And the issue with the staffing is what the chief said earlier is that you guys had lost 40 firefighters in the last how many years was that?
Probably about 3 years.
Yeah, so you've still
3
got
to
to
4
staff
years.
all the stations and everything.
Yes.
And would you just have less people to do that, so they keep it running up? Okay. One more thing. There's a lot more 7, 8, 9. Do we have 10-story buildings here now? There's a lot taller buildings here than there used to be. Do any of you gentlemen feel after this, looking at this, is the fire service here trained to do? That's a different type of firefighting, from what I understand, going up in the tall buildings than some of the search and rescue techniques are different. Are we adequately trained to do firefighting in taller buildings, or no?
In fairness, we haven't spent any time looking at that, but you've got great fire protection in your buildings. I mean, they've all got, particularly the hotels have all got sprinkler systems in. I didn't check with the office buildings whether they're similarly protected, but there is great protection built in there, and I'm sure that the firefighters, in doing the familiarisation visits to those premises, will have considered how to tackle fires, and I'll be more than happy to share our policies and procedures for dealing with high-rise fires in the UK. Indeed, my own department have only just published a document on high-rise firefighting in the UK.
Just last year, we had an instructor that we imported, actually 2 instructors that we imported from the US, and they provided some training for us for high-rise. So we did do that last year. I can provide you the information on that if necessary going forward. But yes, we did engage in that initiative last year. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think it was 15 fire officers that received that training.
Just to move on a little bit from what you said about the volunteer firefighters. I thought that's what we call them in England too. What did you say we call them now? I've been home for a long time.
They're paid, and I think the term volunteer implies they wouldn't be paid. Well, they would be paid. That's the fundamental difference.
Oh,
they
is
would
that
be
what
paid
we're talking about here? Like a special constable's paid, no? So what are we talking? Are you
Right.
recommending here, volunteers or paid?
No, I was quite specific. I said you might call them volunteers, but they're retained on-call firefighters. I didn't go into the details on pay. They're paid a retaining fee. In pounds, it's around about £3,500. What's it, about 4,000 Cayman, something like that, perhaps a little bit more, to retain them. But that is based pro rata on the number of hours of commitment that they give to be on call. And the bit I omitted to mention, which I really should have done, is there are opportunities to use the existing whole-time firefighters to pay them more money for being on call. And when they then turn into the fire station and respond on the fire engine, that they would get paid an hourly rate for each hour that they were tied up at incidents. So it ought to be quite attractive to firefighters with the opportunity to earn more money.
Okay, so just to help me understand it, what you're saying is that it's almost like a part-time firefighter that comes when there's a fire.
I wouldn't use the term part-time, because if you're on call for say 60 hours a week, they're on call. We deliberately avoid using the term part-time because they're actually doing more hours, but albeit on call, than whole-time firefighters are doing on the station. They provide a great service to the community, and that covers, certainly in the UK, more than 50% of the population.
Okay, so in other words, it's like a flexi time almost.
Yes, people work it around their other jobs.
So it's still a full-time firefighter, but they're just not sitting at the station.
They're trained to
manning the station. They turn up when the fire.
When the alerter goes off, yeah, and they're trained to exactly the same standard as the full-time firefighters.
Are we, Mr. Bush? Is that something that we're considering? Would you?
We are now. I mean, this is this is as hot off the press as you can get it, so to speak. I wanted to take this opportunity. So the press and indeed the wider public knew exactly what the issues are and what is being recommended.
But if you go to a system of, I forget what Mr. Holland mentioned, but they would be paid in any. You don't contemplate, or Mr. McLaughlin doesn't contemplate going to a volunteer system where you have people who don't get paid.
I think it's a hybrid. No, not a voluntary. No.
Okay.
And just to be clear, if and when we went down this strategy route, it wouldn't replace the existing resources we had. No, we're talking about supplementing them.
So you may move full time, but half. Sorry.
A hybrid, if you will. So you have a minimum level of coverage at the fire station, with the additional capacity of retained services that are being paid a retainer to be on call. So if there is a fire, they respond. Or if there is a level of response that is needed to invoke that on-call service, then you do so.
Did you say how much the equipment will cost? The equipment?
Which equipment?
The for the first respondents, you wanted to have the equipment.
I didn't, but as I understand it, a defibrillator costs around $2,500 Cayman Island dollars. And talking to Mr. Bush around that, there might be opportunities working with, is it the Heart Foundation people?
The Heart Foundation, the Foundation or British Red Cross.
Yeah.
Okay, in terms of the training, for all the training, will it be done here locally? Are there opportunities for the training to be done overseas?
It'll depend on the business case. What I mean by that is if it is that we can send a few officers to wherever the location is, or if we do need all of the fire officers trained on it, then it may be more business conscious to send or bring instructors here, or send people away to become instructors to come and train. It'll depend on the economies.
Okay. Do you know how many Caymanians are currently stationed for the fire service?
It's 100% Cayman.
100%. And for the recruitment process, are you continuing to recruit more Caymanians, outside foreigners, or do you have potential for that?
Well, I mean, the recruitment process is what it is. It's an open and fair and transparent process. There are minimum requirements to it. I can guarantee that there is a wish and desire to hire and maintain 100% Caymanian, but that in itself is not in the job description. But we simply want the best people for the job, and so far we haven't had an issue with maintaining 100% Cayman. Absolutely. That being said, I'm very conscious of what the market is now, versus the remuneration, the base remuneration that we pay fire officers, and that again will be that's another recommendation of Mr. Holland's is that we look at the capacity and capability of our human resources versus the actual needs, and based on that we may go through an exercise where the job descriptions and the structure of the fire service or certain parts of the fire service may change. Again, all of this is with the sole intent of making the fire service better.
Two things. First off, you mentioned that there was a reduction by 40 firefighters over the years. When you're increasing it, will that be brought back by the 40 firefighters that were lost? The retained firefighters, will that be by 40 or will it be by less? Are you going to will all 40 be retained, or will there be a portion of that 40?
It's simply too early to say. What I think we're doing now is having a professional fire officers like Mr. Holland, Mr. Norris, with over 40 years experience, knowing what the requirements are of the Cayman Islands Fire Service, and with their 40 plus years experience and best practice, giving us recommendations on how best to achieve that. And then through that, now we look at what money we have and then decide on how best to do that. There has been permission granted and resources, funding provided by the government to increase by 20 officers, and we're actively recruiting that. Now, once we do that, we're going to stop and assess, because 26.
26 to be.
We're going to stop and assess that number versus the requirements of operation, and then once whatever happens out of that, then we'll make a decision on how best to proceed. Okay.
And I mean, how long will it be before we see some of these changes take into effect that were suggested by Mr. Holland?
Some can be immediate. Some have to be long term. In the areas of estate and training, we've already started working on that between the acting chief and the ministry on that, and certainly around the equipment and estate side, we should start seeing some immediate implementation.
Okay.
So two more sort of general type questions for Mr. Bush. Have you come to any conclusions, given what you all have done over the last few days, on two things? One, should EMS eventually be a part of the fire service? And two, should there be a split or division between what happens at the airport and airport operations fire, and then the ground operations, the regular responses?
I'll first ask Mr. Holland to answer from his perspective, and then I'll supplement.
Yeah, if I could cover the airport side of things, and I did wonder whether there might be benefit in splitting the two parts of the service, but on balance, I think it actually works very well. It works very well in certainly in the BRAC and here on Grand Cayman. There is good use of firefighters on the airport side, who tend to stay, once they're in the airport side, they tend to stay on the airport side, probably because they like the shift system, I guess. But there is appropriate overlap to support the airport crews when there is a shortfall, so there is some cross-training. I would question whether the amount of cross-training that goes on is not too much, that everybody at the moment is trained as an airport firefighter, even though they might be allocated to the domestic. So there needs to be an optimization on that, because it is more expensive to train somebody up as an airport firefighter. In regards to your question around EMS, certainly in the United States you have joint fire EMS services, and that seems to work well. It's something worth looking at, but I think you've got to look at it from the point of view of benefit of improving the service. I've got to say, it appears to me that the EMS is working particularly well at the moment, and with the with first responders being added to that, I think that we would provide an even better service. But I mean, that is something in the fullness of time that perhaps will be looked at.
Anything else? Last call. Okay. If that's it, just want to thank again everyone for coming. Thank Mr. Holland, thank Mr. Norris for coming to the Cayman Islands.
Pleasure.
And of course the acting chief, Mr. McLaughlin. Thank you.